You're listening to Standing Before the Mast podcast with Chris Heaton, sponsored by Newport Nautical Supply.
Hey folks, Chris Heaton here with the latest episode of Standing Before the Mast. My guest for this episode is Ian Ridgeway. Ian, along with Casey Blum, are co-founders of the FUEL program. That's F-U-E-L. FUEL stands for Foundation for Underway Experimental Learning. At the center of the FUEL program is the topsail schooner Shenandoah. Shenandoah was conceived, designed, and built by Captain Robert Douglas, and she has a long history of providing memorable sailing experiences for thousands of people. Ian and Casey with the FUEL program look to continue that legacy. Led by Ian, Casey, and a team which includes captains, crew members, and voyage guides, Shenandoah now operates as a nonprofit educational sailing vessel. Here's a bit from their website about the FUEL program. FUEL helps young people learn to harness their energy while igniting sparks for learning and life in a novel, supportive, and stimulating environment. Ian and Casey both have extensive sailing experience as captains on the Shenandoah and Alabama. Ian has a degree in environmental studies and a U.S. Coast Guard 500-ton Ocean Master's license. I thank Ian for taking the time to meet with me in their office in Vineyard Haven on a beautiful, warm October afternoon. For more information, you can visit fuelprogram.org. That's FUELPROGRAM.org. I hope you enjoy our talk, and I'll be back at the end with some additional notes and links. Okay, Ian, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me. I'm here with Ian Ridgeway, co-founder and executive director and captain of FUEL. What is FUEL?
Well, FUEL stands for Foundation for Underway Experiential Learning. Bit of a mouthful, but it is a nonprofit organization that was formed for the purpose of giving youth life-changing experiences on board a sailing ship.
How was it formed? How was FUEL formed?
So in 2015, I started, kind of formulating the idea of creating this organization along with Casey Blum. And we, sort of were looking around at the existing programs in the, tall ship sailing world. And Casey has a tremendous amount of experience in outdoor education. And we felt that there was a little bit of room for growth in terms of the programming that existed in the sphere of outdoor education and, the potential for programming on board a tall ship. And so we created FUEL. The organization was officially created in 2017. That's when we got our tax-exempt status as a 501c3, and have been working, towards fulfilling the mission of FUEL ever since.
And how are you funded? Is it completely from donations or the program itself?
Yeah, we generate income through tuition from students participating in our program and through donations from individuals, families, foundations, businesses.
I always associated the Shenandoah with the black dogs. Is it still part of that, or is it completely under your control now?
Yeah, so Shenandoah actually even predates the Black Dog. The ship was designed and built by Captain Robert Douglas of Vineyard Haven, who had this vision for a mid-19th century sailing ship and had her built up in Maine in South Bristol in 1960s, and she was launched in 64. And he brought her down here to Vineyard Haven to do week-long cruises and, to bring people aboard this ship and expose them to really another way of life and a piece of our history. And the Black Dog formed in the 70s, and that brand sort of became, so big that they kind of rebranded Shenandoah as like one of the Black Dog tall ships. But she was donated to our organization in 2020, and that was part of a plan for a generational transition as Captain Douglas was, reaching his 90s and interested in preserving the mission of Shenandoah. We came to them with a proposal about donating the ship to us because we believed we could get the program going again. And this was following the summer of COVID when everything was shut down. She needed major work, and we believed we could get the funding together to do that work and restart the programming.
So is Captain Douglas involved with fuel, or is he, I saw him listed on your website?
Yeah, Captain Douglas is an advisor. We have an advisory board with I think about 10 people on it, and he and I speak at least once a week. He's very much involved as a mentor to Casey and me, and as an advisor and expert on Shenandoah. He's an invaluable resource for us.
I noticed also you have on listed on your website, new ship in the works. And one of the names I know, a couple of the naval architects' names jumped out at me as folks I know. And it's going to be a completely different vessel. I mean, she's steel for starters. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the new ship was designed by Bob himself, who, as I mentioned, also designed and built Shenandoah. And, as a dreamer, shortly after Shenandoah was built and he began sailing the ship, he kind of started to imagine, how she could be improved upon and what he would do differently if he had another chance. And through that exercise, this new ship was born, and he's had the plans for Shenandoah's successor for now, over 40 years. She's undergone a few different iterations over that time, and he handed those plans on to us with the hope that we could get the new ship built and create a long-term and sustainable future for Shenandoah's mission on board that ship. I mean, it's different in that it's steel. I think to most people, if you saw the ships next to each other, you wouldn't know the difference at all. They're both rigged as topsail schooners. They're both about the same size. But the new ship is very different in that it can do a lot more than Shenandoah can.
I noticed, for one thing, she'll have auxiliary power.
Right.
That changes a lot of things.
It absolutely does. I mean, there's few people who could, have experience, steering like a ship like that can really fathom the immense change that happens when you take an engine out of the picture. Shenandoah not having an engine. I mean, her yawl boat can push her in and out of the harbor in no more than 15 knots of headwind, and as long as the seas are really very flat. But in most conditions that we experience here day to day, year round, the yawl boat is not, useful. And so Shenandoah has to sail on and off her anchor and in and out of every harbor she visits 99% of the time. And that's, a really magical part of Shenandoah as an experience. It's so rare and, different to operate that way, but it also means that you can't have a schedule, you can't have an itinerary, you can't promise to be anywhere on a certain date unless you, employ a tugboat, but that's $300 an hour.
Right.
From the time the tugboat leaves the dock till they get back. So, yeah, the exciting thing about having the new vessel fully powered is that, it offers opportunities to do a lot more and to be much more accessible, to come in and be dockside so the public can get aboard and parents and students can see the ship before they go sailing on it, and also to be able to visit ports all over the world.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's ocean going capable.
Right.
It looks like you break down your trips into different groups. You have youth, school groups, university, where they could, I guess, earn college credits, an all ages category, young adults, and then private charters. For the students, is there a curriculum that you follow?
Yeah, each cohort is a little bit different, but the majority of our programming is with kids between the age of 9 and 17. We had actually a couple as young as 7 on board the ship last summer, but we start at 9 mostly because kids younger than that are not ready to be away for a week from their parents. But the curriculum is based around 3 central pillars. One is personal development. which is probably the biggest focus of our programming and our mission. The second one is environmental stewardship, which is, pretty self-explanatory. And the third is mariner competency. And a lot of that happens just by being on board the ship and learning how to navigate every day, coming up and down the ladders and getting water from a hand pump and, raising the sails, raising the anchor to go sailing, coiling down lines to keep the deck safe. So those are the three pillars of the curriculum, and everything that we do on board the ship relates back to those three pillars for the students' experience. They have like a workbook that they complete throughout the week. There's a lot of guided reflection that they do in small groups with staff, and we also do some activities with the whole group, with everybody on board the ship. We do trips ashore. We try to sail, every day that we can, and it's a very rich experience for sure.
Is it an overnight experience then? They're on the boat for the whole time frame?
Yeah, that's right. So they get on the boat usually Monday morning and sail with us until Saturday afternoon. So they're spending every night aboard the ship. All their meals are cooked and served aboard. And yeah, it is a true adventure. They get to leave home and go out on the high seas and experience the ocean in a sailing ship.
Obviously, you have a captain, but what size crew, the professional side of it, are you operating with versus the guests?
Yeah, we usually sail with about 9 crew. So captain, first mate, chef, that would be an additional 6 or 7 voyage guides, as we refer to them, which are the crew on board the ship that sleep in the forecastle. Yeah.
Well, it's a good-sized crew.
Yeah, I mean, Shenandoah is heavy gear, heavy spars, big sails. It's there's no winches on board the ship, so everything is done with block and tackle. The windlass is manual, so it takes a lot of physical energy to sail the ship, and especially with 30 students on board, there's a big need for guidance and supervision for those.
Right.
I mean, we couldn't hoist Shenandoah's mainsail with less than 8 people minimum. I mean, really, like strong, capable people, 8 could potentially get the job done. But
what does it weigh?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to tally up. I mean, I know it's probably about a little over 2,500 pounds, maybe about there.
That's about right. It said that sometimes the cost for a student to come aboard is based on the family's ability to pay, I guess, is a good way to put it. Is that how does that work?
Yeah, so we just in 2022 introduced a sliding scale payment system, and so there's 6 price points and a sort of framework for families. The top price is the actual cost of the program. In other words, to have, what would the ship need to generate every week with 30 students? What would the cost per child be so that the ship could, break even and continue programming? So that's where we arrived at the top price, the actual cost. And then all the prices, the 5 price points below that, are discounts, which we're able to offer because of our ongoing, fundraising and constituents that make annual donations. So I think each year we give away about $250,000 in discounts, which allows families that can't pay at the top tier to still participate. And those prices are a framework. So you'll see, like at the bottom, it'll say, if your household earns between X income and Y income, this is you. And the next price up is a different income level. But those are just a framework. So we really encourage families, that we don't want the cost to be a barrier to anybody. Mm-hmm. We want everyone who wants to sail on the ship to be able to, and that's worked pretty well. I mean, we've given further discounts, below the tiers that we offer, and been able to make it work with every family so far.
And I also saw that participants receive qualified sea time. Is that for everybody? So that if maybe somebody's older, is looking at getting their captain's license, they can count this time aboard.
Yeah, and you just reminded me that I need to send out sea time letters for all our participants last summer. But yeah, the sea time is mostly to encourage students to think about maritime careers and help them understand how, you would start on a path towards a maritime career, which is with sea time, so that you can obtain licenses. Ultimately it's up to the Coast Guard what sea time would qualify towards a license. But for students, that are below 18, most likely that wouldn't count. But for those that are, since it is a training program, it most likely would.
What are the expectations of participation once they're aboard? This isn't a cruise, even though they're paying for it. But how do you get that message across?
Yeah, we don't have too much trouble getting students to buy into the program and the experience and to help out and participate. That's sort of the nature of being on board a ship. I mean, there's so much work happening around you from the minute you get on board, with the crew loading up all the provisions for the week and getting the boat ready to sail. There's just always so much activity. And to be, a passenger that's not participating at all, I think is usually kind of uncomfortable because there's just so much happening. So
Right.
People tend to lean into the experience, whether it's kids or adults. Generally, they want to help. They want to get involved. And so, yeah, I mean, I think although I've never tried specifically in our marketing to address that as this is a hands-on experience, you're expected to help. I think it's sort of self-evident in what people see on board our website. Quick funny story though, we did have a student just this last summer say to Casey, the other co-founder of Fuel, and she was like, "Come on, we need to get all these lines coiled down. We're sailing. It's time to help." And he said something like, "My parents didn't, or I didn't pay $1,300 to come out here and do chores."
Ooh.
And Casey's response was, "Actually, you did," which I think I will always remember because, yeah, that is the experience, to get involved, to do hard work, to face new challenges, to learn new things. That's why you're here.
Right. My wife's British, and I could see her saying that in reply.
Yeah.
That's a very direct response. That is funny. I was going to ask you what the typical itinerary of a voyage might look like, but you sort of answered that earlier on when you said because of the nature of Shenandoah not having an auxiliary, you don't really have I suppose it's not very typical.
Yeah, we don't have an itinerary where Monday night we're going to go here and then Tuesday night we're going to go there, and that's definitely challenging for people to wrap their heads around. Everyone's always curious because it's a sailing adventure. Where are you going to go? But the truth is we really don't know. And that's part of the magic of it. I mean, usually all our food is loaded up by the middle of the day on Monday, and we go for a sail that afternoon and try to leave Vineyard Haven and go to our first destination for the week. But that doesn't always pan out. There were a handful of Mondays this summer where this strange weather pattern kept repeating, where on Monday of 3 weeks in a row, it was just blowing 25 to 30. And we don't go out in 25 knots especially on day one of a cruise with
Welcome to Shenandoah.
Yeah, with 30 students that have never been sailing before. So, we'll hang on the mooring, and if the wind dies by the evening, we'll put the yawl boat in and push out to the outer harbor, and it's all right, the journey's begun. And if there's a breeze in the morning Tuesday, maybe we'll leave first thing in the morning Tuesday. But sailing the boat is very much improvisational. It's kind of like, a musician taking a solo. It's like there's a framework of chords that you're playing within that the notes all relate back to, but you really have to make it up as you go. And it's the same. It's part of the fun of sailing Shenandoah, and also a big part of the anxiety too. You gotta get to a safe harbor each night and put the boat in a place where it's not only going to be comfortable for the students and safe, but that you'll be able to sail out of again the following day. and not be stuck with an onshore wind and all your anchor chain out, hoping and praying that the anchor doesn't start dragging. So it takes careful planning, but it's also a lot of fun. Definitely. It's challenging. Bob used to go to Newport with Shenandoah a lot, and there wasn't a mooring field there at that point. He would just sail up and anchor off of what used to be called Christie's Wharf.
Right. Oh, real early days then.
Yeah.
Before the harbor got developed.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said you could anchor, 100 feet off the dock, run passengers in and spend the night and then sail back out of there. Now there's so much traffic in Narragansett Bay for one thing, but then there's really nowhere to anchor inside the harbor. People sometimes say, oh, you can anchor out where the cruise ships are, but that's totally exposed and in the tide. And so Shenandoah hasn't been to Newport in a long time, but we got to get down there one of these days.
I've seen Alabama in a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Alabama features somewhat prominently in your photos on your website. Is that part of the program at all, or is that like a spillover vessel?
Yeah, well, Alabama's very dear to my heart and Casey's heart. We both, sailed on her for many years. Casey first went sailing on Alabama when she was 9, climbed through the ranks and became the first female captain and also the youngest captain on Alabama when she was, I think, 23. I also skippered Alabama for 6 years, so I have a very dear affinity for that ship. And last year, when our Shenandoah was racing to get out of the shipyard, we did our first 2 cruises of the season on Alabama. That worked out timing-wise, that they were, the boat wasn't sailing yet for the season. And we actually left Mystic, raced back here, and brought like a few crew with us, and just went to work rigging the boat up and getting it ready, and then welcomed students on like a few days later. Didn't have time to paint anything, but we got the boat rigged up and sails on, and we did 2 cruises, our first university voyage and a trip with the Oak Bluff school students on Alabama. So there's some photos and stuff. And
that was what I saw then.
On the website, yeah.
Well, you've only been going a couple of years, but there was a video on the website, and there was some sort of a testimonial by people who've come back to the program. You see that as a pattern that people will eagerly return?
Yeah, in our first year, so the program for fuel, the programs that we're running didn't start from scratch. The university program is something new that we started, but we inherited, Shenandoah's schedule and her programs. So there was a big backlog the first year of students because in 2020, the ship didn't sail due to COVID, and so all the trips were canceled. And so that first summer was jam-packed, and, we hoped that the programming would be meaningful enough, and we definitely made significant updates to the curriculum and put a lot of time into training the staff to, deliver a really special experience for these kids, or meaningful experience. So yeah, thankfully in the second year we saw a lot of, we had just as high numbers. We had, I think, over 300 people participate in week-long cruises this past summer. Yeah, we're already getting emails for next summer. We haven't put the schedule up yet, but parents are eager to sign their kids up. So it looks definitely like it's on the uptick.
Now, how does this, from the university perspective or the college level, where it said something about offering credits, how does that compare to a program such as Sea Semester or something like that? That's a name people are familiar with.
Yeah. So the university programs that we're offering now are just week in duration, and it partnered with University of New Hampshire, so all the students are from UNH, although we can have students from other schools too, but all their credits are going to be through UNH. And it's a tall ship sailing course that UNH is offering that we designed and is being taught on board the ship, and they're getting 2 credits. They're on the ship for, that entire duration. For our semester voyages that we are planning for the new ship, they'll be very similar. They will be similar to existing programs where students are on board for a whole semester and have the opportunity to get a full semester of college credits. That'll be through a school of record that provides the transcripts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does, yeah. There was a very interesting quote on the website that I'd not seen before, but you sort of touched on it before about the students getting into the sort of a reflective mode aboard the boat. So the quote is, neuroscientists and psychologists add that the ocean and wild waterways are a wellspring of happiness and relaxation, sociality and romance, peace and freedom, play and creativity, learning and memory, innovation and insight, elation and nostalgia, confidence and solitude, wonder and awe, empathy and compassion, reverence and beauty, and help manage trauma, anxiety, sleep, autism, addiction, fitness, attention, focus, stress, grief, PTSD, and build personal resilience and much more. And that was by Wallace J. Nichols. That's a loaded quote.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. That's he wrote an amazing book called Blue Mind, which is about the emerging neuroscience that indicates that human beings benefit tremendously from interacting with water, being on or near it, playing in it, hearing it even from a fountain nearby. Yeah, there's more and more. I mean, the neuroscience field is very exciting. There's so much emerging new information about how our minds work, but it seems that being on the water is incredibly beneficial for people. And, it's one of those things that you hear that and you're not surprised. I mean, everybody enjoys like going to the beach or going to the lake, or, some people are afraid of the water. Not everybody enjoys actually being in a boat on the water, but even taking a bath or a shower, I mean, these are therapeutic like moments in our days, or times where we can reflect and, have a change of state, from our regular day-to-day narrative in our heads. So yeah, I mean, in my experience, absolutely. And Jay Nichols is a friend, and we've done a couple things together, but he said Shenandoah is like a awe factory. It's like a place where somebody is having these constant, or if not numerous, at least numerous moments of awe and wonder. And those experiences are actually really important for our mental health. Awe leads directly to empathy. Seeing, a lightning storm come through, or a big double rainbow after the rain clears, those moments of awe where you're just blown away by nature and what it can do, help build empathy, which is, one of the most important things that humanity needs, going forward. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a really special environment for growth to be out on the water on a ship like that.
You asked me about, the podcast. The one I did, I think a couple episodes back, was a friend of mine who's a captain of a 12-meter Intrepid in Newport, Mike. I'd wanted to interview him just to get his stories, because he had some good stories, and he wasn't really into it. And then he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I think I've got something," and he was right. He's part of this group called Sail to Win, and they take wounded veterans and they pair them with professional sailors. They're just launching the program, and I got to go out with them on Intrepid and meet a couple of the guys. And they said some guys really want to get involved. For other guys, just being on the boat, it really helps them, more so than some of the things that they've been trying on land.
Yeah.
So their goal is a little more aggressive. It's not just to get guys out on a boat and make them feel better. It's to go out and compete and win, which they talk about in the podcast. But it's amazing how much it's helped some of these folks.
Yeah, I am definitely a believer.
So let's talk about your background. You have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies, 500-ton license, and how did you get into sailing? Were you as a young child, or?
Yeah, my parents, after they split up, we moved to Martha's Vineyard, and I happened to be a fifth grader here, and that's the age group that Shenandoah historically has mostly sailed with. So I was in class, a cohort. I went to Tisbury School and got to go out on the boat for a week. And, I was a very high energy kid. I really didn't thrive in a classroom setting. It was actually a very difficult environment for me because I just had so much energy, and so much sitting still is required in the classroom every day, day in and day out. So my teachers at a young age were trying to get my parents to put me on Ritalin. I spent more time in the principal's office than I did in the classroom, I think, in first grade. I could tell you probably still the exact every turn in the hallway to get from my classroom to the principal's office. And when I went on Shenandoah, it was a really eye-opening experience for me because not only was it a novel environment where everything is new and very exciting, but it was a place where my energy was really valued and useful. And there's always a task to be done and always something to do with my energy and enthusiasm. And so it was a place that really helped me start to believe in myself and the value that I could add. And so I didn't want to leave Shenandoah after that experience. I was eager to be on board as much as possible. And the ship used to come into the dock every weekend to fill up on water and turn over for the next trip. And I would be down at the dock when the ship came in, and they would let me come on board and help them clean. And so the captain noticed my enthusiasm and invited me back aboard, and I got an opportunity to sail on the boat at a young age, sort of as a junior crew member, mostly because they just couldn't get rid of me.
Perseverance.
Yes, they still can't get rid of me. I climbed through the ranks. Bob Douglas became a really, important person in my life and a mentor to me, still is. And I learned to sail under his mentorship and leadership. And it was really, really life-changing for me.
Now, didn't Captain Douglas's kids, they were captains, or one or two of them were, right?
Yeah, I think his wife, and all four sons at one point had their 100-ton Coast Guard licenses.
Oh, wow.
So Morgan has captained Alabama. Jamie has captained Alabama. Brooke and Rob, the other two sons, have both worked on Shenandoah with Bob. So, their family has been very much tied to Shenandoah for, it's their whole lives.
So how did we get from being a persistent person that wanted to be on Shenandoah to getting your Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies?
Well, I followed the traditional track. Once I became a teenager and started to gain more confidence on Shenandoah as a young officer on board the boat as like a bosun, and then my senior year of high school, I think I was the mate on Shenandoah. My school my experience in school started to turn around because I really started to believe, I knew I could do hard things, and I knew I could, if I applied myself, probably do okay in school. So I remember going back one year after being a C and D student since kindergarten and just signing up for all honors classes.
Wow.
And I did fine in all those classes and turned my GPA around, and then applied to school and went to the University of Oregon and got a bachelor in environmental studies, which was mostly because those were the classes that interested me the most.
Right.
I've always been passionate about humans' impact on the planet and about the awesomeness of nature and being in nature. So, and then recently I upgraded my captain's license. I had the sea time, which, the Coast Guard's changing the stipulations all the time. But right now, and when I upgraded my license, if you had your license and were an officer on board a ship for a certain amount of time, you could go for a higher tonnage, because I never actually spent any time on vessels over 100 tons. But I studied and took the tests and upgraded the license. I think it was 2 years ago now. So excited about that.
Yeah, that whole process changed dramatically. All the guys that I grew up with and got their licenses did it the old-fashioned way, where they collected their own documented sea time and then went and sat for a test at the Coast Guard. And now you seem to take a class with a training facility. They give you a module, you pass the module, I guess, and then you move on and so on and so forth until you get your license.
You still have to go and sit for the tests all at once in Boston for the 500 ton. and above. But yeah, I think the entry point for 100-ton licenses has gotten a lot better. I mean, I think it's great that it's a easier, more sensible path to getting that license. And the 500-ton license, like academically, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. It really was a lot to learn all that celestial problem solving and then celestial navigation problem solving and all the, taking, I think it was like 7 modules or something, and you just had to go up there and do it till you passed them all.
Wow.
But it's great. We need more with big licenses, in our country. We need more people in the maritime industries. So
you kind of already answered this question, I guess, because you're taking reservations for next year, or you're getting inquiries for next year. The boat doesn't go south. It stays up here, as we notice when we come into the harbor on the ferry. There's no plans to have delivery down south or keep the program going year round?
Yeah, that is the plan with the new ship, to operate year round and do semester voyages during the academic year. It's a really important part of a sustainable business model, right, to be able to generate income year round. But Shenandoah has always just been laid up in the winter. And, she's been Bob's life's work for 56 years. His whole life has revolved around her. But in some ways, and I don't say this to diminish what he's done with Shenandoah in any way, but it's been sort of like a hobby, for him. And, now we're trying to institutionalize the program, and it's going to need to generate, significant income or have significant donor support to be able to have a sustainable long-term future. And so year-round programming is, I think, really important to that. But that's one of the limitations with Shenandoah. She's, can't be licensed to go offshore. She has to stay within 20 miles of a harbor and is really best suited for the programming that she does, these week-long cruises, because not having an engine, it's not, you need to be in a stretch of coastline where there's lots of options for where you can go. And you also need to have the right conditions to be able to sail with a yawl boat, in any kind of big seas that could become dangerous because it could get carried away off the stern of the boat. And so, yeah, it's not optional for Shenandoah to be used.
Is Shenandoah an inspected vessel?
She is.
She's sailing in that. And I assume because Captain Douglas designed her keel was laid in U.S. waters, so there's no need for a waiver to the Jones Act or anything like that. And the new boat will be built in America, I would imagine?
Not necessarily. We're actually looking at a shipyard in Nova Scotia that we like, but there is a special exception to the Jones Act for sailing school vessels, SSV, where they are actually allowed to be built out of the country and still operate as an American flagged vessel. So, yeah, we do have that opportunity to build elsewhere.
The best resource for folks who want to learn more is your website, I imagine. Is that the best portal?
Yeah, and some people jump on Instagram. That our Instagram is Fuel Program, but our website is fuelprogram.org. And yeah, there's pretty much, you should be able to find answers to any of your questions on our website, and if not, our contact information is there. So you can.
I like that you had it looked like almost an alumni directory where you could, I don't know if you log in, but you could connect with someone that you may have sailed with in the past. That's a very unique feature.
I wish more people would take advantage of it. Shenandoah has had such a long history and so many crew and so many passengers. We've estimated over 17,000 people have spent at least a week on board that ship. So if you've ever sailed on Shenandoah, please do visit the alumni tab on our website and fill in your information, because the goal is to connect people with their past shipmates. And we can do that because, as you'll see on the website, it'll ask what years you sailed on the boat and in what capacity. So it actually automatically categorizes everybody that fills out the form. And the whole point of that is to be able to, tap into this huge community and connect with our past shipmates.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Really enjoyed this.
That was my talk with Ian Ridgeway, captain and co-founder of the Fuel Program. One thing that I wanted to reiterate, if you go to their website, that's fuelprogram.org, program.org. If you ever have sailed on the Shenandoah, Ian encourages you to go to the alumni tab and put in your information. That way you can connect with someone you may have sailed with at one point. The other thing I wanted to mention was there's a book that I happened to pick up before I left the island called My Shenandoah by Douglas Cabral. I started reading it right away, and I can highly recommend it. It gives you the whole history of the vessel Shenandoah, as well as a profile on the man, Captain Robert Douglas, who conceived, designed, and built her. And once again, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Standing Before the Mast podcast with Chris Heaton, sponsored by Newport Nautical Supply. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.